The unsettling experience at Südwestfriedhof, Stahnsdorf, Germany. My name is Lukas, and I never thought I'd experience something like this. I'm not usually one for ghost stories, but after that night at the Südwestfriedhof in Stahnsdorf, I have to admit that some places just have an eerie atmosphere you can't ignore. It was late autumn when my girlfriend Sarah and my best friend Max suggested visiting the famous cemetery in Stahnsdorf. The place is huge, known for its old graves and imposing mausoleums, and it's definitely not the kind of place you visit at night. But Max had always had a thing for spooky adventures, and somehow he convinced us both to go along. We arrived just before sunset. The cemetery stretches over a large area, surrounded by tall trees and dense underbrush. The towering oaks and pines cast long shadows over the graves, and although there was still a bit of daylight left, it already felt gloomy. "It's really big," Sarah muttered, looking around. She didn't seem entirely comfortable. Max, however, was thrilled. "Imagine how it'll look at night," he said with a grin. "Come on, let's explore a bit." I shrugged and followed, with Sarah sticking close behind. We walked deeper into the cemetery, and the older the gravestones became, the more overgrown and decrepit they looked. Time seemed to stand still the further we went. There were no sounds except for the occasional rustle of leaves beneath our feet. Suddenly we stopped in front of a massive mausoleum. It was covered in ivy, and the heavy iron gate was slightly ajar. "Should we go inside?" Max asked, his voice vibrating with excitement. Sarah and I exchanged glances. "I don't know," she began, but Max had already pushed the gate open with a loud creak. "It's just old, nothing more," he said, stepping inside. I was about to follow when I suddenly got a strange feeling, like we were being watched. My gaze wandered over the old graves, but there was nothing to see. "Come on," Max called from inside. So I took a deep breath and stepped through the gate. The inside of the mausoleum was cold and still. The air was heavy and musty, as if it hadn't moved in centuries. In the middle of the room stood a stone sarcophagus, covered in a thick layer of dust. "Looks like no one's been here in decades," I whispered as we looked around. Then we heard it, a faint whisper. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Yeah," I replied, glancing around. "Maybe it's just the wind." "That wasn't the wind," she said, pulling closer to me. Max just grinned. "Come on, don't get scared so easily." But then it happened. The whispering grew louder, clearer. It came from all directions. We spun around, but there was no one there. Panic rose in me. "We should leave," I said quickly, but before we could move, the heavy iron gates of the mausoleum slammed shut with a deafening bang. Sarah screamed, and I ran to the gate, but it wouldn't budge. "What the hell?" Max muttered, now looking just as panicked as we were. The whispering grew louder, and now it sounded like several voices speaking all at once. The temperature in the room dropped, and I could see my breath forming small clouds. "We need to get out," I shouted, pounding on the gate, but it wouldn't open. Then we heard footsteps, slow, heavy, as if someone was walking directly toward us. "What is that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. None of us dared to turn around. The footsteps grew louder and closer. Then everything went silent. No more footsteps, no more whispers, just an oppressive silence. "Open the gate," Max suddenly screamed, and in his panic he pushed against it so hard that it flew open. We bolted out of the mausoleum without looking back. The path back to the car seemed endless, but we didn't stop running until we reached it. None of us spoke during the drive back to Berlin. It wasn't until much later that we even talked about it, but no explanation could really comfort us. Since that night, I've never set foot in a cemetery again, and I never will. Whatever we felt that evening, it was real, and it didn't want us there. If you liked it, please subscribe and like this channel. See you soon.